Alright, so here's my drawing. I had tower truss example number 1. Had my name on it, of course. And as you can see, I have built 2 trusses that fit right over that drawing. There's a sheet of wax paper over the drawing. And now I have 2 identical trusses. And just to make it a little easier to see, I'm going to turn this over. And you can see I have 2 identical trusses. In fact, if I lay this guy on top of this guy here, it's almost perfect. Remember, we talked about it symmetrical, being the same on both sides. So now I have to turn these 2 trusses, into something more like this. A tower that's 3-dimensional and will stand up. And certainly I am not there yet. Okay? So somehow, some way, I need to put these 2 sides together. Now we know that this is a truss, and this is a truss, just like these guys here. And these other 2 sides on this tower are what we call connecting sides. Alright? So now I have to build my 2 connecting sides. Important point. The connecting sides do not need to match whatever your truss design is. So whatever you built here on your truss, it does not have to be the same on these other 2 sides. Although it would be nice if they were symmetrical. Alright? So hopefully I'm not confusing you. Look, if I take this block that is 2¼ inches wide, and I take this block, by the way, I want to make sure that my truss pieces are lining up nice and neat, and I put them here on this block, and I make sure that the ends are lining up here and at the other end of the block, and I let go and they fall over. That's no good, so I put this one up, and then that one falls over. And otherwise I might be standing here until the glue dries. That's not a good use of my time. So what I'm going to do is take a couple of smaller blocks I have and put them like this to keep those 2 trusses from falling over. And now you can see I'm even on the ends here, I'm even on the ends here. And I don't know if you can see, if I tilt this a little bit, you can kind of see, it's falling apart. But there's a little space between the top of this block and my truss there. So the block is not going directly flush or even with this here. There's a space of about 1/2 inch. And so now I need to put pieces of balsa across this truss like this, and that will make my connecting side. I have seen students try to cut and very carefully put pieces in between these 2 parts of the truss, between here and here. That is about 10 times harder, it takes longer, and it almost never is stronger. I want you to put your pieces on top of the truss, and it's actually faster, easier, and will be stronger. Okay? So just like we did in the past, I'm going to start with a nice clean piece of balsa here, and I'll use my pencil, measure carefully, make a mark there. You can see my pencil mark, and if I cut on that mark, I should be pretty darn close to being straight across there. Now I would advise you, people say, Mr. Pat, how many pieces should be going across here? I would say between 4 and, I don't know, 7. I think 9 or 10 is too many. I think 3 is far too few. Alright? But I would put one certainly at the top and the bottom. And then from there, you kind of can pick your own design as long as you mirror it on the other side. Now, this is one of the trickiest parts, gluing these guys on. And here's what I would say. Maybe even a piece of tape across the top here. Not too tight, but I just don't want these blocks to wiggle away. Okay? So now these pieces are a little steadier. I'm going to cut myself another piece of balsa, maybe 2 or 3, and you'll see that pretty soon I've got what we like to refer to as a ladder going across our connecting side. almost like a ladder you might use to get up onto bunk beds, if you ever climbed a ladder on a boat or something. The kind with rungs. Yeah, look at that. So if I do this often enough, that piece is pretty close. Maybe snip the end off to make it nice and clean. Remember, we're still looking for neatness. We're still looking for symmetry. All right? And I'm going to glue these guys on just the way I did in the past. Just off camera here, I've got a piece of wax paper. Now, you would probably be doing this right over your board that has the drawing. Just a little confusing with the camera coming down from above here if I still have my drawing on the thing. But I'm going to scoop up my little spot of glue here, dab, and glue those pieces in place. Now, if I get a little, what I like to call happy with the glue, in other words, if I put too much glue on here, and the glue drips down the side and glues my truss to this giant block here, the only way to fix that is to break your truss. If you break your truss, it means you got to start over. At this point, nobody wants to start over. We've already got several days into building these two trusses. So don't put too much glue on here. Certainly you got to have enough to hold it together. But I'm just taking a little tiny little dab here. Dab, dab. Dab, dab. Stick my piece on there. I'm trying to make sure nice right angles as much as possible. Keeping it neat. If you wanted to use a ruler, I suppose you could, but I don't think it's necessary. You can just kind of eyeball it. Especially this first one, because whatever you do on this side, when it's dry, you're going to flip this guy over, and then you'll know where you need to put your ones on the other side. Okay? It will be pretty obvious. In fact, it looks like I should probably move this guy over a little bit here. I want it to look nice and be more symmetrical. Because there's about this much space here, and there's about this much space here. There. And I'll get rid of this extra glue. I can just wipe it with my finger. But if there's one or two things about this step that I would say are the most important. One, make sure your pieces are going across the top. Let me see if I got a big piece of balsa here. It's easier for you to see. These pieces should be laying across the top, okay? Not trying to fit in between there. The second thing is not to use too much glue, because if the glue drips down the side, and I'll tilt my camera, if the glue drips down the side here, and you glue it to this block, boy, that's going to be a bad scene. The third thing I would say is right now, this is about the most fragile state this tower is going to be in the entire time you build it. So right now, if somebody were to come by and bump your block, your board, something like that, that would be terrible. So I would ever so carefully pick this thing up, slide it in on one of the shelves, out of the way, far back, of course with the number on the board facing out so you can identify it as yours. Already, you should have written your name on the side of the truss, so if something were to happen to your truss, we would be able to tell that it was yours. But right now, you've got to let this dry overnight. Just letting it dry for half a period is not going to do it. This first connecting side is super important. And when this is dry, I will show you the next step. All right, through the magic of video editing, it is now the next day, and these pieces I glued on here on my connecting side are now dry, so I'm going to very carefully peel this piece of tape off. And I no longer need this block, or this block, or even this block here. Now hopefully you haven't glued your truss onto there. Sometimes you can kind of slide it out just like that. Ooh, so nice. And I don't need this guy anymore. I can give it to the next person that's ready to do this step on their tower. But right now, this tower is what we call a three-sided tower. It is very fragile. Would it stand up? Yes. Would it hold much weight? No, it would not. So right now, it is very, very fragile until we get this fourth side connected. So now, I don't need those blocks anymore, and what I'm going to do is cut and glue in the same places, here, here. I'm going to match and make it symmetrical exactly where I put them on the other side. So I would glue these next 5 pieces, which I will do over the course of this evening, and then through the magic of video editing, you'll see what it looks like when I have both sides with what I call the ladder, meaning all these horizontal side-to-side pieces here, all taken care of. All right? So watch this. All right, so now it's the next day, and you can see both sides of my tower have connecting sides that go horizontally, or form what I would call the ladder that you could climb up if you were working on a house or going up on a boat or a bunk bed or something like that. Hey, listen, this is where we used to stop many, many years ago. This tower has 4 sides. It'll stand up. It'll hold a little bit of weight. I don't remember exactly when, but at one point we wound up with a few extra days, and I said to the kids, hey, you know what? Just for fun, let's cut some diagonal pieces and glue the diagonal pieces. And honestly, I'm not going to lie to you, I was just kind of looking for something that was going to give them a little extra work to do and take up a little bit of extra class time. Oops, is that the wrong one? Let's see which one fits here. I want these to be symmetrical. That looks pretty good, right? Guys, when we added just a few diagonals on each side, our towers, instead of holding 30 or 40 pounds, we're now holding 60, 70, even up to 100 pounds. Just by adding these few diagonals, it really strengthens up these things, okay? So, as in the past, I'm going to use my little dab of glue. You know how to do the diagonals. You did them on your trusses, right? The only thing I would say is this is kind of your last chance to make things nice and neat. If your piece does not fit perfectly, remember the old trick with the piece of sandpaper, where if you need to adjust your angle, just give it a little drag, and that might fit just a tiny bit better. Oh, look at that, sweet. Okay? And once I put these 4 diagonals on here, I'm going to let it dry overnight. Here's the problem. I have to do the same thing on the other side after these dry. So you may be at the point in the tower excuse me, where I spend 10 minutes maybe putting these diagonals on, and then I have to wait until the very next class, an entire day later, or maybe even over the weekend, depending upon what day it is, before I can do my next step. Right? See how that's zigging and zagging and zigging and zagging? So this one has to go back this way. Right? What I'm saying is, this takes time for the glue to dry. Now maybe you missed a few days, maybe you had a band lesson, maybe you were sick and out. What you could do, maybe check with your teacher, see if you can come to a non-team. Because cutting and gluing 4 diagonals might take you 10 minutes, right? So if you were to do that during your class time, you come back after lunch during on-team, this will be dry, you could flip it over, and once again we're going to match to make it symmetrical, those diagonals. Ladies and gentlemen, once you have all 4 sides with your ladder, meaning all these horizontals and diagonals, your tower's done. Give it to your teacher, they'll put it in the office. Way safer there. As long as you put your name and period number on it, because if you didn't put your name on it, the teacher's just going to toss it in the garbage, and they'll probably laugh at you too, because they told you a million times to put your first and last name on everything. But anyway, at least that's what I would do. So diagonals, cut them neatly, let them dry, flip it over. Again, at this point, we don't need any more of these blocks. The tower is all stable and held together on its own, 3-dimensional. And that is how you finish putting your tower together. All right?